This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Shelagh Fogarty.
Hello there, good afternoon to you. Coincidentally, really, a topic I was going to talk about anyway today, connected to teaching, but we can also link it to other professions as well. Kind of dovetails in nicely with what we've just heard from Angela Eagle there about wanting to be much more proactive in government in creating pathways for, I sound like a government press release, don't I? Creating pathways. Well, but I'll stick with it because I think it's a good way to describe it. Creating a pathway, a route by which young British graduates, young British workers can get themselves into particular professions and particular jobs in a way that seems to have eluded them previously. And yet you have huge vacancies in certain sectors, and you have young graduates not able to find jobs, or young non-graduates struggling to find which area to go into, which job to go into, which apprenticeship to seek, that kind of thing. And I think the conversation I want this hour, it links to teaching. There is a new report out today, or some research, more specifically, by the National Foundation for Educational Research, that says that there could be a wide pool of potential teachers in the current generation of new graduates who would be attracted into the career of teaching if it were more competitive with other jobs in terms of pay, flexibility, and other factors as well. And I talk about teaching and education on this programme a lot, and I'm always very keen, although there are problems, and there are problems in education, there are problems in the lives of children and families, there are problems in the kind of choices that graduates are making to go into teaching or not go into teaching. I'm always keen not to describe teaching in negative terms, if you see what I mean, because it's such an important job. It's such an important role in our world that we almost have to believe it's still a great profession, because an awful lot of people in it don't think it is any longer. I know some personally, I speak to many on the programme who are shattered by what's happened to their profession. And it does make you wonder that, if you're a 22-year-old graduate now, are you really going to be rushing to become a teacher? Some people will, and it's great that some people will. But when there are other options which give you more flexibility, give you better pay, don't have that heavy hand of government on it, you can kind of see why graduates might not be making this choice. And if you have thought about teaching but balked at the idea ultimately and not chosen it, what was it that was going on in your mind? And when you are making decisions about which career to go into, or indeed, if you're older than a graduate, to switch into, because some people go into teaching in their 40s, their 50s. If you've decided against teaching, what was it that put you off? And maybe you did a bit of teaching. We know that the numbers of new teachers leaving is very high as well. So what is that problem? What is it? And what would need to change to attract you into teaching? 0345 6060 973. And if you have your own personal example of either leaving a particular profession or deciding against it, do feel free to throw that into the mix as well. It doesn't have to be teaching. Julie McCulloch joins me, Director of Policy at the Association of School and College Leaders. I'm trying to fly the flag for teaching, Julie, but that there's, there are problems. Of course you do.
I'm very pleased to hear you flying the flag for teaching, Shelagh. I mean, it is a fantastic profession, and we know that hundreds and thousands of people work in teaching and love it. That the opportunity to shape children and young people's lives is an amazing one. So it is a fantastic profession, but it's not an easy profession. It is very challenging. We know that it's always been challenging, but I think probably even more so now when we're seeing more and more children, young people with complex needs, with complicated lives that need support. And we're increasingly hearing that the role of teacher is going far, far beyond just, I use that word in inverted commas, but just teaching now, and is, increasingly about a huge amount of pastoral support and broader life support to children and sometimes to their wider families as well. So it's a great job, but it's a challenging job.
I mean, just an example of that came up in a conversation I had the other day on air is that millions of pounds, I can't remember the exact figure, I think it was 14, but certainly many millions of pounds a year is spent from teachers' own pockets to provide food or toiletries or fresh clothing or washing clothes, that kind of thing, for kids who've obviously whose families are in great difficulty. And that's just one example, isn't it, of the social element of teaching that's involved now.
Absolutely right. And, we did an exercise. So we're an organisation that represents 25,000 school and college leaders across the UK. And we did an exercise with some of our members recently that was asking them, what do you do for the children and young people in your care? We had a bit of a brainstorm on it. And some of the things that people were coming out with, lots of them I knew already. Some of them surprised me, to the extent of, buying furniture for families who are moving into a house, an unfurnished house, they can't afford to furnish it. Things that I think most people have no idea, actually, that is sometimes falling on the doors of schools at the moment.
And to make it more attractive, this research seemed to be saying that the kind of life flexibility that other careers can provide, don't always provide. You said that it's not an easy profession. I don't think there's such a thing as an easy profession, is there really? Most professions have, any career span will have its highs, its lows, its periods. Absolutely. Its periods of calm. And I know from my own, there are periods of calm and there are periods where things are fairly straightforward. You're still working hard and getting on with the job, and then there are, for whatever reason, there are more intense times. That's kind of true of every profession. But are there particular aspects of being a teacher that really do mean the flexibility isn't part of the picture?
It is more challenging, I think. So, lots of schools are actually finding ways for teachers and other staff to work much more flexibly than they ever have done before. So, lots of people are looking at, I suppose, of obvious things like job shares or part-time working, but also things like looking at where teachers don't have to be in front of children, where they have time to do their planning and their marking, whether they can be a bit more flexible about where that happens. Does it have to be on the school premises? Could people do that from home? So there are schools that are looking and being really successful, actually, at finding different ways of introducing more flexibility into the roles of teachers. But it is harder. There is still a need to have a teacher in front of a class for the whole school day.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like me saying I'm not available between 1 and 4, really, wouldn't it? I kind of have to be available between 1 and 4. But on that, I can't think of a reason why a teacher who's got a day's marking to do, or is off timetable for a day for whatever reason, I can't see why doing it from home would be a problem. And yet we do still have this real fixation on sort of bums on seats in the office or the workplace, whatever the workplace happens to be, don't we? And yet we've all got, particularly young people, who might be thinking of a career, might be saying, well, hang on, I've just been through a pandemic in which every practice that was supposed to be essential was turned on its head and done differently and still delivered, or mostly still delivered. Why are we now going back to this rigidity? And there's something to that, isn't there?
There is. I mean, looking at some of the data around this, something I was looking at recently said that 44% of workers in the UK now work remotely or from home for at least some of the time. So you're right, it's an absolute societal shift that we saw sort of through and coming out of the pandemic. And that is what we're increasingly hearing, or our members are increasingly hearing from young teachers, but actually increasingly from people who are older as well, who might have caring responsibilities, looking for a way to keep doing what is a very challenging and often very physical job, actually, later in life, not wanting to retire, but wanting to find ways to make that work. So, it is a challenge across the age range. And, there are particular issues in schools. There's definitely some flexibility around the planning time, although, thinking about all of those other roles that teachers do as well, sometimes it's
being
not,
a presence
sometimes
in the
you do
school,
need to be in the school, whether that's about safeguarding and numbers and that sort of thing. So there are challenges there. But broadly, I think our view on this is there are schools doing really innovative and interesting work, and the more we can do to sort of share that practice and give ideas to other schools, the better. But I think there is also a bit of a reality here that we have to recognise that this isn't a job that can be as flexible as many other jobs. You do need to be physically in front of your class. So there's something there that we need to get the right balance to recognise that if this is a job that doesn't, to as much of an extent as other roles, have that sort of flexibility, actually we need to compensate people in other ways for that. We do need to look at what that means in terms of pay and other conditions, because we are hemorrhaging teachers and we need them.
And given what I've just been talking about in the previous hour about immigration numbers and visa-based immigration, we know that secondary schools have a teacher shortage, but we also know, and just talked about it yesterday with a number of young graduates, that they're finding it difficult to get into a particular sphere, whatever it happens to be. There must be some way of, sort of putting those people together and at least seeing whether teaching might be for them instead.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there are lots of young people who would be brilliant teachers who are coming out of universities with degrees that would be really relevant, but aren't always that obvious. So one of the pieces of work you mentioned, the research by NFER, one of the pieces of work that they've been doing is around actually which degrees have the sorts of skills that we need, but might not be as obvious as some for teaching practice. So maths teachers, for example, we're really, really short of. Obviously, people with maths degrees make brilliant maths teachers, but so might people with psychology degrees or business degrees. So I think it's thinking flexibly about that as well as taking the obvious route.
I can guarantee you that I wouldn't, but on that front, I'd be like the worst applied teacher known to man if you put me in front of a maths class. Yeah, well, they might love me, but they wouldn't learn anything. Thanks very much, Julie. Good to talk to you. Julie McCulloch, Director of Policy at the Association of School and College Leaders. They kind of lost me at DY by DX. It's 2:19.
This is LBC. Shelagh Fogarty on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
If you're in teaching, what's wrong with it and what's right with it? Because there will be people listening here, graduates listening, who knows, we might be between us providing a new teacher to the world. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Even if it was just one, and let's hope it's more than that. But what is wrong with teaching that might make it more attractive to young graduates, and what is right with it, to attract them for better reasons? Michael has called from Seaford. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Shelagh. I'm afraid that I've been listening to LBC for the last 20 minutes and possibly before, and I just realised that that most of the people being interviewed haven't really got a clue as to what the young people think about the pressures being put on their teachers at the moment. I'm recently retired from profession, and it's refreshing to be able to listen to stations like LBC, but my goodness me, when I listen to my colleagues and the reality of what's going on in schools, we've got two completely different pictures. So teachers are judged on various criteria, and they're being judged by their own peers. Now, I've spent my life as a science and chemistry teacher. A couple of years ago, my lessons were being judged by a French teacher, and they were a French teacher who got into senior management or whatever. It could be by any other routes. It's just that professionalism is not valued anymore. This is what you find that it's the sugar, the baker, and the candlestick maker are doing are judging professionals. I as a young, for instance, science teacher, let's say in the schools now, who was in university a couple of years ago, they want something for their money. They want something for their efforts, and all they get is stress. They're up half the night, marking or particularly planning lessons, and their lessons they're planning are being judged by any other teacher apart from a science teacher. It's just the anomalies that really show up in the profession today. Are
you saying that teachers have just for years been taking a beating?
I do, yes. And the students know it. You know, you can imagine the average science student at a sixth form, you know, doing A levels. They're quite savvy about life, and they can see when their teachers are under stress and they can pick up vibes just from, you know, the way the lesson is being presented. It's a subconscious, subliminal perception.
And you're retired now, so what does the arc of change look like then? When did it go wrong?
You know, I'd be controversial here, Sheila. I went wrong with Tony Blair.
That's all right, you're allowed to say that.
That's a long time ago, but it went at that point when they started to try to get their pound of flesh out of teachers, and it was education, and it was the new regime where the senior management of every school was responsible for the ethos in the school and the examination results and everything. Everyone went over to a kind of results-based vocation. So I feel that.
Well, results matter, don't they?
Yes, but results do matter, but you can't. Our A-level system and our GCSE system is far too high-powered. Far too. You ask if you were to go across to the continent now, going most secondary schools on the continent, you would find that what is being studied in, let's say, the first year of the sixth form is actually first year of undergraduate work in most schools, universities on the continent. You know, we had such a high-powered system. We get A-levels done, so get degrees done, honours degrees done in 3 years. On the continent, it takes 4 years. And when our students go across to the continent, they say that it's so much easier because the rest of they're in classes where the rest of the class are catching up, because we just take at O levels. I know my own subject, I think it was something like only 10% got a high-level mark in chemistry. And going into A-level in chemistry, it's only 2% of the population take the exam and pass it. And that 2%, and you're talking about, then you're judging teachers trying to get children who have no real kind of talent with regard to the subject. But the key problem, Sheila, is that the A-levels are governed by the examination system, and it's the examination system which very cleverly delivers, results. Very cleverly, it delivers accountability, but the fallout rate along the way, the number of children who are...
But that's a slightly different thing, isn't it? Because I would have thought, I mean, I remember the leap from O-level to, which was now GCSE, I remember that leap from that to A-level. And it was steeper than the leap from A-level to university, without a doubt. It was the steepest leap I think I've ever experienced educationally. But I would argue that in and of itself is something to be proud of, as long as in the years preceding that, we work out which children are capable of that leap and which are not, and give them some alternative by which they can be in a fulfilling way educated.
That's right. You know, in Germany, it takes 5 years to do an honours degree. It takes 3 years in this country, and we just leave our struggling sixth formers who can't get up to the university level, nobody actually. It's the universities that are really not accountable. If you took the kind of chemistry being studied by, let's say, upper six students over here, and then set by 18-year-olds on the continent, you'd find that the stuff that's being done on the continent is so much lower than what our children are.
Let me bring you back to the whole question, though, of why graduates aren't looking to go into teaching, or that many more would be, if it were different in some way? What would that key difference be in your view for you to be able to say, yes, it's an attractive profession for you?
Well, in my own subject, there'll be less accent on examination results, and also more accent on fun. There's less and less practical work being done in the sixth form. Because
and does that squash ingenuity, do you think, which in your line?
It squashes ingenuity, but it also squashes
spirit
of the subject. Yeah, the school spirit, and it doesn't. It takes the fun out of the subject, and youngsters, and particularly with a subject like chemistry, we always sounds very bish bash bosh bang, fireworks, whatever, but they have to, virtually most chemistry students are also doing maths. They're learning calculus. They're learning really high-powered stuff by international standards. And
you argue you can do all of that with fun.
No, you can't. That's the problem, because the examinations and the examination boards are the kings of the system. They are the dictators.
You don't sound like you would recommend your former profession to anybody at the moment.
Not at the moment, because it's not the head teachers, it's not the local authorities, it's not all the other agents there. It is the examination board, and nobody will touch the A-level system. Nobody will touch the GCSE system. The examination system is sacrosanct.
All right, I have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Michael. Michael in Seaford. Coming up after the news, continue to take your calls. Lots of them coming in on this. If you're a young graduate and chose teaching, tell me how that's going. If you're a graduate who considered it but didn't go into it, what was putting you off? 0345 6060 973.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with Shelagh Fogarty.
Let's get to your calls. And your messages coming in have been interesting as well. Ken sarcastically says, I'm not sure what they do, but 12 plus weeks holiday sounds quite good. Mr. Baines says, my partner has been a teacher for 25 years. She starts work at 8, leaves at 4:30. She then settles at her desk at home at 9 and works till 11:30 or midnight. Well, that's grim. Sometimes even later. She works 4 days but spends her day off working. She will also work 3 to 4 hours at the weekend. There is no recognition, and people go on about, they get all the holidays. And Mr. Baines concludes, why would anyone go into teaching? Which is kind of the question we're digging into this hour. Callum has called from Dunfermline. Hello, Callum.
Hi, Sheila. First time caller, long time listener. Just in regards to the teachers thing, I live in Fife, and I've got quite a few family members who are involved in education at various places for Fife Council. One of my family members at PSA, another one's a permanent teacher, and the other one's classed as a substitute teacher just now. And the one who's a substitute teacher would have graduated a few years ago, including a probationary year in Scotland. And just now in Fife alone, there is 600 teachers on the substitute teacher waiting list. Wow.
In Fife alone?
Yes, and that's for primary school teaching.
Yeah, that's a shortage if ever there was one, isn't it?
No, I mean they've got a lack of vacancies. That's the issue, and it all comes down to how it's funded. There's a census done annually by the Scottish Government for getting the number of teachers involved in teaching, and what happens is the family member knew exactly what week that was going to be on the basis of when the request for substitute teachers came out, because the Scottish Government funds the placements then. So what the schools do is put all the permanent teachers into training courses for that week.
What do you think the issue is here then, that we need to create more posts?
I think it comes down to the fact that there is a post probably available. To be honest, the class sizes are getting too big. And ultimately education is suffering, in my opinion, across the board. And you've got plenty of ready and willing teachers available to fill those roles. It's just simply no one wants to actually put up the funding for it. It's all...
And give them a full-time job.
Whether it comes out the council's budget, the Scottish Government's budget, the UK Government's budget, no one's interested. It's purely a case of that. The posts and the children are there to get taught.
It's incredibly frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think that fundamentally it's causing a poorer education system overall.
Well, a supply teacher can only do their best, can't they? If you're a geography specialist and you go, I know in primary school it's slightly different, but if you go and we know that non-subject teachers are often teaching in high schools, and that diminishes an education, no doubt.
Oh, definitely. I think that the other way of looking at it is that the placements, I mean, in Scotland, they're still taking university placements on significantly in teaching, particularly primary school teaching. And yet there is just simply not the roles available for the teachers when they do actually graduate. And the way in which it works is the probationary year, which is the first year that a teacher does when they're outside of uni, gets covered by the Scottish Government. So the funding's there for that. But if they then want a teacher to become permanent after that, there is no funding and the council will not fund it.
Well, thank you for your call, Callum. Callum in Dunfermline. We can